Homestuck is actually good. That's my hottest take, I think.
Welcome to Wow If True, the podcast of your wildest memes.
We talk about niche internet fame, interview people who are making it on the internet, and chart our own misguided quest for online attention. I'm your Durst dreamer and Knight of Heart, Isabel.
I don't know what that means, but I'm Amanda. Anyone could be famous on the internet, so why not us?
A young woman sits at her podcasting station. It just so happens that today, the 6th of August, is no one's birthday. Though it has been 25 episodes, it is only today she will learn about Homestuck. As you might assume from my introduction and my introduction of myself, today's a Homestuck episode. Amanda, I am so sorry. Let me tell you about Homestuck.
I just want to say that it is our friend Maya's birthday.
Oh, fuck, it's Maya's birthday? Happy birthday, Maya.
But I don't think she listens to the podcast, so it's okay.
Fuck you, Maya.
We love you, Maya, but apparently Isabel loves nothing more than Homestuck, not even her friends, which is why today she's teaching me about Homestuck.
Don't turn off the episode yet. I promise it'll be fun. Maya, don't start with this episode. But okay, so let's start at the beginning. Amanda, what do you know about Homestuck?
I first encountered Homestuck when I was a Tumblr teen in about 2011 or so. Mm-hmm. And I remember people being really excited, but in a tragic way about Homestuck.
Let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by excited in a tragic way?
People were super into it, but they also seemed like they were in a lot of pain. I mean, I don't know, I was a teen who liked weird stuff on the internet. Shocker that I grew to be the person I am now. And I was like, oh, everyone's really into Homestuck. What's Homestuck? And I guess, I asked some of my Tumblr friends in the Arctic Monkeys Tumblr fandom, the overlap of Arctic Monkeys Tumblr fandom and Homestuck Tumblr fandom. I guess I asked people, should I get into Homestuck? And they were all like, no, you shouldn't. So I didn't. And then the rest of what I know from Homestuck is from you. I know that it's a webcomic. I know that it's apparently, ridiculously long. Mm-hmm. I know that we did an episode about Blazeball, and I love Blazeball, and apparently a lot of Blazeball fans also are Homestuck fans, which I don't know what that says or means.
No, it totally makes sense. Having consumed both Blazeball and Homestuck, Blazeball hits the same narrative notes that Homestuck does. It makes 100% sense that the fandoms overlap.
On our Blazeball episode of this podcast, when you and Robin, our guest, who is involved in both Blazeball fandom and also apparently knows about Homestuck, you both informed me about how there was a thing where at a Homestuck fan convention, I guess some of the characters have gray skin. Is that a thing?
Yes, some of the characters do have gray skin. Great start, Amanda. Great start.
So apparently somebody was trying to cosplay and they put Sharpies into bath water and tried to dye their body. I learned that on this podcast.
No, it was alcohol.
Oh.
It was alcohol.
Oh, well, yeah. And then I also know, at some point we will get to this, but one of our listeners who is on Patreon, shout out to our Patreon, patreon.com/wowtrue. You can monetize us so that we can keep talking about Homestuck. This is a really bad sales pitch, but one of our patrons, Brae, who has consumed Homestuck, told me to ask you about the buckets. And I was like, is the buckets the gray Sharpies? And they were like, no, but that too.
Wow, Brae is doing you so dirty. That's an unfortunate thing for us to talk about here, Brae.
Well, we can get to it when it makes sense to get to it.
Oh, we are going to get to it. I'm not going to say it's a major part of what we're going to be talking about today, but you really do need to talk about buckets to talk about Homestuck. But okay, so that's more than I expected. Can I just say that it wasn't my idea to do the Homestuck episode? It was your idea to do the Homestuck episode? So this is on you.
I think it was a collaborative idea.
I think no one is winning here because you have to listen to me talk about Homestuck for an hour, but I also have to talk about Homestuck for an hour. And Amanda, I'm a 25-year-old soon-to-be corporate lawyer. I don't know if I can have that sort of stain on my record.
Let's just get this over with. Go on.
All right, so why are we talking about Homestuck? We're talking about Homestuck because, like Amanda said, it's a weird sort of underground internet phenomenon.
I think it is everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Yeah, because at its height, Homestuck's fan community was in the millions. It had more than 1 million unique visitors coming to the site daily.
That's wild.
It is the 6th highest Kickstarter project, or like Hiveswap, which is an offshoot of Homestuck, which is part of the fraud. We're going to get to the fraud. So there's clearly a huge fan base for this, or at least there was back in, I want to say about a decade ago now, at its height, around the 2012 era. Interestingly enough, I didn't find Homestuck through Tumblr. I actually found it by going to TV Tropes and getting redirected to the Homestuck page like 5 million times, finally trying to read Homestuck, trying 4 times, not getting into it, and then finally reading it, and then it became wildly influential to my character in a way that makes me really uncomfortable, actually.
Great.
Yeah, no, it's not good. When people talk about Homestuck, I think there's actually 3 different things that are sort of encompassed in the term quote-unquote Homestuck. So there's Homestuck, the actual piece of media, Homestuck, the insane fandom, and Homestuck, the long-running fraudulent media entity inclusive of Andrew Hussey's insanity and Viz Media's acquisition of the IP. There's a lot going on here. This is similar to how in Christianity, God is split into the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But in this case, the Holy Ghost is Andrew Hussey, or maybe Dave Sprite, or actually, it's really Signless. Amanda, you have no idea what I'm talking about, right?
I mean, I'm Jewish, so I have no idea what you're talking about for multiple reasons.
Excellent, excellent. That's a great place to start. So let's start at the beginning of what actually Homestuck consists of. Homestuck is a webcomic that began as a forum input style like webcomic. This was pretty common, I think, in the 2000s to early 2010s. Started by Andrew Hussey, although he pretty quickly abandoned the format because it made it too hard to tell the story he wanted to tell. This is why the first 300 panels of Homestuck are full of horseshit. This is why people say that you should get through Act 1 before giving up. And I say webcomic, but it's really more of a quote-unquote multimedia experience, where a majority of the pages are one-panel images plus text, and as you keep going, the text becomes more and more novel-like, rather than like, just a couple of snippets of dialogue. And other pages and panels are animations featuring music that was collected in a series of albums. Notable musicians for this include Toby Fox, who did go on to create Undertale, and we'll talk more about that later. Homestuck also included things like walk around in browser video games, and there was also a companion webcomic that was quote-unquote drawn by an in-universe character. If you like really shitty JPEG art, you should go check out Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff. It's not good. It's very bad. That was then followed by literally a 600,000 word novel epilogue called the Homestuck Epilogues, which are split into the meat and candy epilogues. Don't worry about what that means. A sequel webcomic, which is part of the fraud, 2 visual novels, and an unfinished video game. Again, that's part of the fraud.
Wait, so when you talk about your meat life, is that a Homestuck reference?
No, I talk about meat life because I think it's funny.
Okay.
If I were to use Homestuck terms, the meat life would be the canonical life, and the candy life would be the fanon life. So maybe my meat life really is my canonical, just me going about my day and not being on the internet life.
So you mentioned that there is an Act 1 of Homestuck. How many acts are there total?
This is a complicated question because there are technically 7 acts. If I get that wrong, don't fucking at me.
Oh, it's like the Harry Potter books.
But each of the acts are further subdivided into subdivisions, which then have like intermissions within them, which also have there's a lot of nestling of content. So even though Act 1 and Act 6 sound like they should be the same length, Act 1 is like 1/6 the side of Act 6. And this is kind of an example of when project creep happens, where I think the story that Hussey wanted to tell at the beginning of the webcomic was very different from the story that ended up happening. And this happens in a lot of webcomics, actually, where the scope of the storyline ends up meandering in ways that both the creator and the fandom don't really understand or really want it to happen. But it's fine. Homestuck is actually good. That's my hottest take, I think, is that Homestuck is actually a really interesting piece of fiction.
Okay.
Let's actually talk about what Homestuck actually consists of, other than the formatting.
What's the plot,
All right, so skip ahead 30 seconds if you think you're going to consume Homestuck at any point, Craig. Just skip that. Homestuck is about a video game that creates universes through the destruction of the planet it is activated on. The story follows 4 teens from Earth who initiate a session of that game, which turns out to be fundamentally broken due to a problem with the session that created their universe. Initiated by 12 alien teens in the past who fucked up their session due to some other alien teen. You can see where I'm going with this, right?
Are the aliens the ones with the gray skin?
One set of aliens is the ones with the gray skin. So basically, if you want to split these into factions, which don't actually make sense after a while, but you have basically the beta kids who are humans from Earth. Then you have the trolls who are trolls from Alternia. And then you have cherubs. Don't worry about the cherubs. But you also have Carapacians, and you also have the alpha kids who are from a different version of reality after reality was scratched, which means that basically you're resetting everything. I could go on. I could go on for hours with this. Basically, it's about a video game that creates universes and what happens when that video game is broken, when you get a glitched version of that game. It's also kind of a story about growing up on the internet and having a lot of internet friends, which makes it really an interesting piece of like 2010s like internet mythology in a way, because it really does hit on a lot of the same tropes that a lot of like historical epics do, but it's in the context of playing a shitty game with your friends.
So is it like the Odyssey but the internet?
Yes, but it's really more like Ulysses but the internet.
But Ulysses is like the Odyssey, but Irish.
Yeah, so like really it all comes back to the Odyssey, I guess.
I have read the Odyssey multiple times because, you know, I went to school in the US where you just read the Odyssey multiple times for some reason.
No, but I have read Ulysses, and I think that people's comparisons of Homestuck to Ulysses make a lot of sense. And I have a bet with one of my friends that Homestuck is going to be taught in English classes 50 years from now. We have actual money riding on this.
Can you elaborate on that?
Because it's a really interesting piece of hypertext fiction. And it's one of the earliest things that used it in a way that was interesting and was actually coherent.
Okay, see, this is the thing, is like, this is why, in some ways, I was not innocent in deciding to make a Homestuck episode, because I do think that clearly there's a reason why this was so influential on the internet, and why it has become so ingrained in internet culture, but I'm also just so confused about why it's so ubiquitous, yet so nowhere. Like, I don't think I've heard anybody mention Homestuck except for you in the last, like, couple years.
Well, you see, that's because Homestuck is inherently cringe and not based.
Is that a Homestuck joke?
No, that was just a shitty internet joke. Have you heard people saying things are based?
Oh, no, yeah, I remember Lil B, the based god.
Yeah, exactly. God. No, that was just me making a shitty joke. Yeah, I think the thing about Homestuck, and I have a whole section about this I want to talk about later, is that Homestuck is one of those pieces of media that a lot of creators get into, because you see a lot of Homestuck references within, like, comics and cartoons, and, like, Undertale like started in Andrew Husse's basement. And also there's like 3 or 4 major science fiction fantasy authors right now who were writing Homestuck fanfic a decade ago. Do you know why I know this? I know this because I did read their Homestuck fanfic and I'm obsessed with it. I think the most prominent example would be Tamsin Muir, who is writing the Locked Tome. It's not a trilogy anymore. There's 4 books now. There's going to be 4 books. That's exciting to like 2 people out there listening.
I'm just Googling Andrew Hussey because I'm just like, who is this person?
He's a weird guy. But yeah, so Homestuck, the interesting thing about that is it's sort of like a creator's piece of content because it really is a story about stories. There's a very real meta aspect to Homestuck about the fact where everyone within it knows that they're in some sort of narrative to some extent. And toward the end of Homestuck, that gets very, very apparent in a very real way. There's no way for me to explain this and have it make sense.
I just want to share with any of our astrology heads out there that Andrew Hussey is a Virgo.
That's important.
I don't know what that means because I only know stuff about my own astrological sign because I'm a Taurus.
How Taurus of you.
I know.
But okay, like let's zoom back from like talking about important things. I have a little game for you, Amanda.
I'm so excited.
We're going to play True or False. Okay. Betty Crocker is a major antagonist in Homestuck. True or false?
I'm going to scroll up so I can only see one question at a time because I'm just looking at all the questions and I'm doing like a test-taking strategy where I feel like the one after it is true, so it makes me want to say that this one is false.
Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. I'm not going to grade you on this. There are no right answers because if you know more things, you know too much about Homestuck, which is inherently losing.
Okay, well, I'm going to go false.
Wrong, that is true. The Batter Witch is a major antagonist in Homestuck, and also Betty Crocker in Homestuck is an alien fish person who is immortal. Don't worry about it. She is also still Betty Crocker.
Okay.
All right, second question. Joe Biden had canonical gay sex with one of the major main characters, Dirk Strider. True or false?
See, I don't know why this just strikes me as being true.
Wrong, it's false. Obama did.
Oh, I think I did know about that.
Yeah, no, Obama is a character in Homestuck, and Dirk does have sex with him off screen. This is really just implied, but very strongly implied. All right, all the main characters in Homestuck were created in test tubes. True or false?
I mean, aren't some of them supposed to be human? Which, I mean, humans can be created in test tubes. I don't know. My gut isn't really doing well on this. I'm gonna say false.
Wrong. It is true.
Oh.
The reason for them being created in test tubes is because to be a player in this game, you need to be created through ectobiology and time travel shenanigans, meaning that you will get created in a test tube on a meteor. Don't worry about it.
Even the humans? Mm-hmm. I'm overwhelmed.
We're only halfway through this game, but you can see why there are so many Homestuck references in the sense that people will be like, that reminds me of Homestuck, because Homestuck references so many goddamn things that like everything is a Homestuck reference.
Okay, so far we have that Betty Crocker is an antagonist. Obama had sex with the main character, or one of the main characters.
He's not a major main character. He's like a secondary character, and this does happen in the epilogues, but yes.
Okay, and then all of the characters were created in test tubes. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the most influential bodies of work on the internet from the 2010s.
Now I have a really hard question for you next. Vriska is a protagonist. True or false?
Okay, so I know that Vriska has something to do with Homestuck just because you added me to a group chat with a bunch of people. I know maybe like 3 out of 40 of them.
Oh, it's okay. That's how many I know too.
And one of them, I think, is it Robin? Mm-hmm. Whose name is Vriska from Homestuck.
Yes, that's Robin.
I'm gonna say Vriska's a protagonist.
This is sort of Schrodinger's question. Vriska is technically a protagonist, but Vriska is also an antagonist. Vriska is kind of one of those characters that there was a time on the internet where if you mentioned Vriska in conversation, this would evolve into the Vriscourse, the Vriska discourse, because she is so goddamn both compelling and controversial. We could do a whole podcast episode on the Vriscourse and what that means about shitty female protagonists, but I'm gonna leave it at that.
I feel like this is like Georgina and Gossip Girl.
Sort of. Is that Vriska is a bad person, but she's also narratively correct. So in any other piece of media, she would be an antagonist. Like, she does things like paralyze her friends and also kill them, but also she's the only one who's aware that the world that they're living in runs on, like, narrative rules, because she's a huge, like, LARPing nerd. But also she is a pirate. Also a spider. Again, don't worry about it.
Okay. You know, I feel like I have seen a spider. See, it's just like, as you mention things, I'm like, that entered my eyeballs at one point.
Yeah, Vriska's really out here on the internet causing problems. All right. Guy Fieri is a minor antagonist. True or false?
Okay, I'm gonna go true because I feel like Guy Fieri is almost a little bit too much in the meme land. He's a good guy, it seems, but I feel like he's a little bit too omnipresent on the internet, and maybe it's because he's in Homestuck.
Yeah, you were right. He is a minor antagonist. I think his presence on the internet is separate from Homestuck. In fact, I think Homestuck was referencing Guy Fieri's existence on the internet.
What came first, Homestuck or Guy Fieri?
Damn, questions for the fucking philosophers. All right, and the most important question of all. Alien reproductions, like for different aliens, and romance includes A, buckets, B, snakes the size of universes, C, Lucky Charms, D, card suits.
Well, it's gotta be the buckets.
Wrong, it is all of the above.
Okay, but that wasn't an option. I was literally gonna say all of the above, but then I was like, no, it's not, like...
I'm so sorry, that was a trick question, and I have failed you in that regard.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be a good test taker. I just need to be right all the time.
Okay, so what I will say about this is that the buckets and the card suits have to do with troll reproduction and romance. The snakes the size of universes have to do with cherubs, and Lucky Charms has to do with leprechauns, funnily enough. Don't worry about it.
Is there any, like, sex in Homestuck?
No, they're like 16.
Okay.
Other than Dirk canonically fucking Barack Obama.
Okay.
That's actually an interesting question because in the actual webcomic, there's no fucking. But we do know too much about how they fuck because they're teenagers who talk about fucking. And also in the epilogues, canonically, people have fucked because they have children.
Hey, it's Amanda. If our podcast had ads, here are where the ads would go. But we aren't big boy podcasters yet with big boy pants. But if you like our show, have a few extra dollars, want to support us, and want some bonus content, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/wowiftrue. Anyway, this isn't an ad break, it's still part of the episode. I'm here recording after the fact because we had some listeners call in to tell us about how Homestuck ruined their lives. However, I would like to propose that the reality is that actually Homestuck ruined my life because Isabel is currently on vacation drinking sangria on a boat, and I am here working on our podcast episode about Homestuck. I can't believe I am thinking this hard about Homestuck. Anyway, our first voicemail is from Sophie.
So, when I was in middle and high school, so we're talking starting around, 2011, 2012, I was in this youth Shakespeare performance troupe where, we would do performances like Henry V, and we would mispronounce all the words, and probably nobody wanted to see it, but we had a great time. So I did this for a few years. It was my main thing outside of school, and it was kind of my first opportunity to make friends outside of high school. So very, very exciting. And what you need to know about this Shakespeare troupe is that most of the people in it were homeschoolers. And what these homeschoolers liked, aside from Shakespeare, was Homestuck and cosplaying Homestuck. I knew nothing about Homestuck, but I desperately, desperately wanted my Shakespeare friends to like me, to think I was cool. So, in that kind of situation, you learn about Homestuck fast. And so I sort of learned enough to become conversant in it. I learned vaguely who the trolls were and who the kids were, at least the first set of kids. And learned some of the major memes and Homestuck jokes that I could make. And it worked. People liked me. And one day I got invited to the Halloween party of a homeschooled kid that I'm going to call Mickey. Now, Mickey's parties were kind of legendary. Not only was every single 13 and 14-year-old kid in this Shakespeare troupe kind of in love with Mickey because he was sort of gothy, sort of emo-y, whatever. He had these black t-shirts that he'd wear and we'd all swoon. But Mickey's parents wouldn't supervise the parties. So very big, exciting cast party-ish, scandalous vibe. And this Halloween party, the theme was you had to cosplay. So I obviously picked the sexiest troll I could find, and that was Vriska. The one-eyed, spidery murder troll who's just sort of fun and sexy in the kills people way. Yeah, I wanted that. I wanted that energy. I wanted to serve that at the tender age of 13, 14, whatever. And so I did. I, very carefully hand-painted this Vriska t-shirt. I was going for a human-stuck Vriska so that I wouldn't have to paint myself gray. And I, punched out one of the lenses of some of those 3D glasses so that I could have the sort of one-eye spidery thing happening. I painted my lips and eyelids blue, and I think it was just sort of paint. I don't even think it was, body safe. And I roll up to this party, and this is, the sexiest I've ever felt in my life, this Vriska cosplay. And people at the party were playing the Pocky game, which was very big among, cosplay nerds of the Midwest at the time. The Pocky game was basically one person starts biting one end of the Pocky, the other person starts biting the other end of the Pocky stick, and then you kind of lady in the trampet and you kiss. Very crazy. And so that's how I had my first kiss, was in Vriska cosplay at the house of my homeschooled Shakespeare troupe friend. I think the person I kissed was named Brae. I'm not sure where they are now. I don't even really remember what they were cosplaying. But, I hope they're well. And I hope that this hasn't had any interesting long-term impacts on me.
Wow, Sophie, thank you so much for sharing that delightful story. I would react more, but I already listened to this before recording, so I'm just floored, honestly. And now our next message is from Bryan, but Bryan sent Isabel a Facebook Messenger recording, and you can't download those, so I'm quite literally going to play the audio from my computer and see how my microphone picks it up. Living on the edge here at Wow if True.
So I got into Homestuck in high school by peeking over Isabel's shoulder while she read it in our English class, and getting way into it actually exposed me to a lot of cool things. It was my first real interaction with online fan communities. It got me into doing fan art. The shared interest helped solidify our high school friend group to the point that we still talk daily in the group chat several years later. I actually ended up putting the fact that I helped moderate the Homestuck subreddit on the college application, so, lots of positives. But there was this one time I was talking with Isabel about it, and I ended up following her into the school's anime club and joining. So overall, definitely a negative experience. Love you, Isabel. Thank you for ruining my life.
You know, Bryan, Isabel ruined my life too because I'm recording this right now and learning about Homestuck, so I'm with you. And last, we have a message from Brae, who did not have the tech savvy to send a voice message, so I will read the email that they sent us. In about my sophomore year of high school, a little over 4 years ago now, oh my god, Brae's a child. Brae just turned 21. Happy birthday, Brae. One of my friends discovered the cursed web comic known as Homestuck and shared it with the rest of us. We were all pretty nerdy kids, same, and quickly became obsessed with Homestuck, not same. And this obsession permeated almost every aspect of our lives. We would spend all of our lunch period theorizing about Homestuck. We turned our group chat strictly into a Homestuck OCRP chat. That is original character roleplay for those who haven't read enough fanfic. And one of my friends even attempted to make a TTRPG based on Homestuck. Thankfully, that never came to fruition. The important part of this story links back to that RP chat. Like any early high schooler with too much access to the internet and too little concern for their own safety, we exclusively used Kik for messaging, and we had 3 major chats on Kik. Now, I will say, I actually never had a Kik. Back to Brae's message. One was the aforementioned RP chat, one was an out-of-character Homestuck chat, and one was a fairly dead chat with our other friends who had yet to be initiated into the Homestuck cult. The RP chat focused on our individual class specs, and then Brae links to something from homestuckexamination.tumblr.com. Isabel didn't explain class spec analysis to me, but there is a specific class spec quiz that Brae linked me to in this message, and honestly, I'm not doing anything tonight. Isabel's on vacation drinking sangria on a boat, so I might make some Patreon content and take this Homestuck quiz because I have lost control of my life. Anyway, some of us went with the first class spec we were given, and others, definitely not me, what are you talking about, retook it until we found one we thought fit us better. We then took these results and shaped our entire digital personalities around them, and then proceeded to roleplay as ourselves with the powers given by these class specs. For the most parts, our chats were pretty tame, mostly just making memes with the occasional, I will kill you, you woo, and whatnot. Oh my god, that's a little, I don't know, when people talk about death, I'm just a little like, oh. But there were a few times actual beef came about. Most of these friends were what some would call tryhards, meaning they were hella deep in the Homestuck lore and theory boards, oh my god, that sounds terrible, and would fight each other on how accurate our powers were. The occasional beef was primarily a result of some of us having, quote, inaccurate powers while role-playing, although for some reason I have vague memories of a specific interaction in which one of my friends attempted to go on a murderous rampage in chat, and I ended up turning him into a teacup with bubbles for arms, sucking him up into a vacuum cleaner, and storing him in a pocket dimension in a dresser that I locked and destroyed the key to. Needless to say, he was fairly inactive in chat for a few hours, and then we had to have a discussion in the out-of-character chat, making rules so I couldn't do that anymore. Damn, yeah. I mean, when I read this, it reminded me of how a friend in elementary school, our friendship ended because she stole my Webkinz coins, and honestly, I think that's the same thing. But anyway, that was our ad break. That's not really an ad break, although I did mention our Patreon twice. You should totally subscribe to our Patreon, also because I'm definitely going to take this Homestuck class spec quiz. I have no idea what that means. Anyway, back to the podcast.
But yeah, so that's kind of what Homestuck consisted of, and I think I've given you a pretty good highlights reel of how zany it got, but that's separate from the experience of reading Homestuck.
How often did Homestuck update, and what was it like when Homestuck had new content?
I was getting to that, because let's talk about update culture. And now we're spelling update with an 8 instead of an ATE here, so like UPD8.
Is that from, is...
Yes, that is from Homestuck, and that's how people would say that Homestuck is updated on social media, where they would post update. That was kind of, I think, a large part of the fandom experience, because Homestuck would update regularly enough when they weren't on their like hiatuses, which were called like the Gigapause, the Megapause, blah blah blah.
So in Blazeball they have a siesta and then the grand siesta.
Mm-hmm. It's similar to that, except this is all at the mercy of Andrew Hussey, who just decides when this happens. And he's just some guy. The way that I would say is update culture was successful was the fact that it was random but predictable in that you would probably get one a week or one or two a week. but you would have no idea when the pages would drop. You had no idea what would happen in them. And then if you were in the community, then all your friends would be screaming about what happened and then making content. And so there was like a pretty predictable pipeline of content that was just variable enough that it would get everyone's brains excited. And this happened for years.
There's almost a certain like anxiety to that where it's like, what if you miss it? And then what if you're like a content creator in the Homestuck fandom and you're like not on the internet for a day and then you miss the boat?
I think that was probably concerning for people who were in the fandom, like in making content. I didn't make any content for Homestuck, which I feel like is surprising, probably.
Yeah.
But this is because I was 16 and worried about getting into college. So I had bigger things in my mind.
Yeah, whereas now you're 25 and up until like a week ago, we're worried about studying for the bar.
Yes, which is, much less exciting, right?
And now you're just worried about getting the bar results.
Oh my god. I'm so fucking worried about this. Like, this isn't good content, but oh my god.
I mean, I'm sure it's comparable to how I felt when just taking your Homestuck quiz. And, I failed and I'm still okay. Which I'm sure that's exactly the same as if you were to fail the bar, you would feel the way that I feel now.
These are complete equivalents. You're so right.
Yes. Yes, correct.
But yeah, like I said, so this was more than 1 million unique visitors a day. So you can imagine how much internet space this took up and how fucking annoying this was to everyone.
No, yeah, this is what I remember is like, as someone who didn't read Homestuck, because people who liked Homestuck told me not to.
You shouldn't have listened to them. You should have just read Homestuck.
I was just like, I don't know. I mean, I also wanted to get into college, and I was already obsessed with too many things.
I feel like I actually don't think you would have liked Homestuck.
Certain sci-fi stuff gets a little bit, like, too weird for me. I'm more of, like, I learned this term recently, slipstream fiction.
Yeah, slipstream fiction fucks. But I also like it when things just go balls to walls crazy. But let's talk about some of the stuff that the Homestuck fandom did. You mentioned the Sharpie thing. Everyone knows about the Sharpie thing.
I didn't know about it until you and Robin told me about it live on air.
Yeah, which is, the best place to learn about it, right? But yeah, someone did try to dye their skin with Sharpies at a convention. Don't do that.
When it comes to cosplaying, safety first.
Exactly. Other things the fandom did is they did mail Andrew Hussey a dildo at one point. With his consent, just vibes.
Okay, I mean, if he consented.
But this was sort of a relationship that the fandom had to Hussey. Hussey also wrote himself into the webcomic. Like, Hussey is a character in the comic.
That fascinates me. From what I know about Homestuck, I feel like it is simultaneously metafiction and autofiction.
Yes, this is correct.
That's fucked up. But, like, in a cool... I really like metafiction.
I don't want to tell you to read Homestuck because it's a large investment of energy that I don't think is worth it in 2021. To quote some quotes from writers from Wikipedia, because I did go see what Wikipedia had to say about Homestuck when I wrote this 5 pages of Homestuck information for this episode. Ben Tolkien has said, "Do I recommend Homestuck? Should you drop everything and start reading it? You can't. Homestuck is over, and I mean over. Not just that it isn't updating. Homestuck, the masterpiece, was the event, the community, the shifting pace of updates, the constant chatter between fandom and author. Homestuck is done. If you missed it, you missed it." And I completely agree with that.
I mean, speaking of that, I just went on JSTOR and searched Homestuck. There are 5 results, which honestly I think that there would be more.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh. I mean, I think Homestuck doesn't have a lot of scholarship around it because it's a webcomic from the 2010s.
Like, I feel like that means that there would be scholarship about it, but I don't know if this is interesting, but one of them is just special issue comics and media. One of them is 100 top global thinkers of 2012. One is an article called Making Geeks. One is called 404 Page Not Found, The Internet Feeds on Its Own Dying Dreams. That's
a good title. That fucks. Maybe we should read that.
I'm gonna save that one for later.
Well, my friend Roshan wrote in his Harvard application an essay on Homestuck, and he did get in.
Wow. We should have had Roshan on to talk about his Homestuck essay.
I never read the essay. I just know that he wrote his essay on Homestuck and did get into Harvard. And then it made me think, damn, I should have written my essay on Homestuck. I did not write my essays on Homestuck.
Did you apply to Harvard?
Of course I applied to Harvard. I was an overachieving 17-year-old.
Did you get in?
Of course not. Why do you think I went to Penn?
Oh, man. How did you feel not getting into Harvard when your friend got into Harvard writing about Homestuck?
Well, he's a year younger than me, so by that I didn't really care.
Okay, that's good. Do you think you would have cared if it was the same year?
I think I would have cared if it was the same year, but that's a funny enough thing happening that I don't think I could be mad, like in any scenario. Because I'd be like, yeah, okay. What I'm saying, I guess, is that Homestuck was really about the friends you made along the way.
Was it?
I mean, anecdotally, yes. Like, I still talk to my friends that I forced to read Homestuck, like, daily. And then I think the better story about how I got someone in Homestuck is, I guess Roshan is, like, the theme for this episode now. This is where you have to guillotine me because I was in Italy for a school trip. And we were at this hotel where you could, like, me and Roshan were sharing a room. And then I agreed with him that I would read the Queen's Thief book series if he would read Homestuck. And he really got the ass end of that deal. Because Queen's Thief is, like, a good series of books. And Homestuck is Homestuck. And no, so, like, in this random, like, hotel room in Italy, we made a pact to do that. I also didn't know him super well at that point. But I did get him to read Homestuck.
And then he got into Harvard, so...
And then he got into Harvard, yeah. So I guess, you know what, I think what's interesting is just the way that a webcomic can change the course of somebody's life. Like, if anything, Homestuck is a great argument for the importance of media to, like, human beings and how quickly we become obsessed with things.
Well, how do you think Homestuck changed your life?
I think Homestuck really changed a lot of my speech patterns, and it changed a lot of my sense of humor. Because I think one of the things about Homestuck is that it's very ironic in a way that doesn't actually make any goddamn sense. And one of the main characters, Dave, is a quote-unquote irony cool kid, which when I was 15, I was like, that appeals to me. That's who I want to be in the future. In the same way that watching Iron Man when I was 12 made me go, that appeals to me. That's who I want to be in the future.
And now you write fan fiction.
Yeah, now I suck. It's fine. But no, Homestuck, I think, really gave me my first foray into, like, weird internet fandom, at least observing it, because before that I had been in fandom, but not, like, the weird parts of fandom, but all of Homestuck was the weird parts of fandom.
What is the distinction between internet fandom and weird internet fandom?
I mean, I think weird internet fandom is when the fandom mails the creator a dildo. That's weird.
So how and why did that happen?
I don't remember, but I do remember it happened. I think it was a 4chan joke that got out of hand.
You know what else is a 4chan joke that got out of hand?
What else is a 4chan joke that got out of hand?
Pepe the Frog.
Oof and ow. Rip Pepe and the IP.
Rip the IP.
Rip the IP getting yoinked by the alt-right.
I wonder what it feels like for people on the alt-right to be mad at you. That's not something I experienced on the internet this week. Anyway.
I'm pressing F for you in my spirit.
We're not going to talk about it. It's fine. It just happened.
Oh god. That's rough. Shit's rough out there.
It's brutal out here.
It's fucked up out here. You know Homestuck is out here? Existing? Owned by Viz Media.
What is Viz Media?
Viz Media is basically a media company that acquires a lot of just stuff. It's a more official brand than Homestuck had before.
What was the terms of the acquisition?
That's a great question because I don't know, and it's not really public.
Do you think that Andrew Hussey has a lot of money?
Maybe. I want to say yes, but I also kind of suspect that they're just incompetent as a person. But this is sort of an interesting question because this goes into the fraud.
Okay.
I promised we'd talk about fraud.
You did.
So this is where things get fucked. Because I've talked a lot about how Homestuck was, contrary to its immense cringeness, a positive experience for me and a positive experience for a lot of people. But this is where we learn that Andrew Hussey is probably a shady motherfucker. At the very least, he's incompetent, and at the worst, he's malevolently fraudulent. In 2012, Andrew Hussey launched a Kickstarter for a video game based on Homestuck. It was to be called Hiveswap. It does exist now. The Kickstarter raised $2.5 million.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. It was the 6th most successful Kickstarter of all time. Full disclaimer, I also pitched into this Kickstarter back when I was in high school. This is why me and my friend have matching Homestuck t-shirts, because they were Kickstarter rewards.
Nice.
They say Game Bro and Game Girl on them, and they look horrendous. But okay, so the original plan was for the game to be designed by What Pumpkin, which is Andrew's company that does all the Homestuck merch and stuff like that, and to be developed by a third-party development studio, The Odd Gentleman. The Odd Gentleman is like a real studio. They've done other projects. And this sort of limped along for a few years, and after many delays and some sketchy shit there, What Pumpkin ditched the third-party developer. So here's where fraud number 1 happens. People say that there was fraud involved with this whole situation and that The Odd Gentleman fucked over What Pumpkin, but there aren't really any primary sources about this other than hearsay of people saying that I heard that XYZ happened. So we're gonna put this as like a hard maybe for now. And this might just be due to my shitty journalism because I didn't look that far into this because this is kind of old news at this point. But yeah, so then the game moved into in-house development at What Pumpkin. Basically, a new team was created and this was based in New York City, and they were working on it. And then the entire New York City staff was fired completely out of the blue with no warning, no severance, and no health care, even as development was going well and What Pumpkin was courting major investors.
I mean, I don't know about you, but working in the journalism industry, this doesn't really seem too out of the blue to me.
That's rough. But yeah, eventually about like the first half of Hiveswap gets released as like something different than what people said it would be in 2017, built off of the work done by the New York City team. Totally not crediting for them for the work. Also, low-key, this sounds like a lot of just shitty indie game situations. The problem here is that $2.5 million did go missing.
Yeah, that doesn't just happen.
And then Andrew Hussey sells Homestuck to Viz Media, which is basically, like, it's a publisher, basically.
Yeah.
I should have said that earlier. It's a publisher.
One time I lost a transit card with $15 on it, and I cried.
That's rough, buddy.
I was going through a rough time. But imagine losing $2.5 million and just went poof.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of arguments for where it could have gone. It doesn't look great.
Did they lose it, or did it just go somewhere else?
Let's put in quotes for lose it. Viz Media sabotages Hiveswap. What Pumpkin works on other games. This is why I've said that there's been other games. They never really finish what they were supposed to do for the Kickstarter. The second part of the game has still not yet materialized. Andrew has washed his hands of all of this as well. He's not even really involved. And right now, What Pumpkin is kind of still working on different projects and really not finishing this game. And it was $2.5 million in Kickstarter money. So the other thing that happened that I want to mention is that Sarah Z filmed a Homestuck episode. Do you know who Sarah Z is?
No.
Sarah Z is a YouTube video essayist, and she has about almost 400k subscribers for her work on just internet community history. She'll summarize what went on in XYZ fandom, or this is what this whole thing is about. And then she did a Homestuck one, but there was a huge back and forth with her legal team and the Homestuck people, where the Homestuck people accused her of defamation and stuff like that when it was very clear that she hadn't. The interesting thing about this is that it kind of highlights some of the issues that happened with the fraud situation and how much What Pumpkin and Andrew Hussey want to keep under the table and locked down. Because What Pumpkin has been very notoriously silent about what happened. So anything anyone knows about the situation comes from people who are unhappy with What Pumpkin or got fired or left. The defamation accusations were totally bullshit, by the way. It was also a situation of they didn't realize she had a lawyer, I think. And so they thought they could intimidate her because they were oh, YouTube personality. And then she was actually. So yeah, I feel this really says something about people who make content and their inability to maybe manage situations.
I wonder what it would be like to be someone who makes content but then can't manage situations.
The thing is, this is a conversation that could probably take 3 hours to really go through what happened in the fraud situation on what people know, but it's not interesting to anyone who's not involved. I think the interesting thing here for the layperson is kind of that bad people can still make good art.
Oh, really? I had no idea. I like Harry Potter.
Oh, delighted to tell you there is a Harry Potter themed troll.
Oh.
He is, unfortunately, genocidal.
I feel like you still haven't told me about the buckets.
Okay, so the buckets. So, troll reproduction involves buckets. We don't know how canonically. However, people have headcanon that it is just a bucket of jizz. Cause trolls don't reproduce like human beings or any mammalian creature. They reproduce via a third party known as the mother grub. Arguably, this could be a sexually dimorphous species where normal trolls and a mother grub are the two sexes involved. But basically, people have headcanoned, yep, jizz in the bucket, take the bucket to the mother grub. Mother grub eats the jizz, makes more babies.
Well, what if it was like a mason jar?
No, it's explicitly a bucket. We have seen them on screen.
Okay. Well, I mean, but like, what if, like, does that have to be the vessel?
I think it's more of a cultural thing.
Okay. I'm not gonna question troll culture.
But yeah, so that's kind of an overview of what Homestuck's situation is in the past, and kind of the most interesting thing about it is the influence it had on other creative media and fandom. We've talked about this before earlier on, but a lot of people who ended up making really interesting other pieces of media were directly influenced by Homestuck. Like Undertale, like I said, literally began in Andrew Hussey's basement. Megalovania from Undertale is actually a song about Vriska. because it was featured in the webcomic before it became Sans Undertale's boss fight theme years later. Steven Universe, Adventure Time, etc., all of these have Homestuck references within it because the people who work on cartoons are the exact same demographic as the people who read Homestuck. Gideon the Ninth has like 100 Homestuck references in a trench coat.
What do you think is more ubiquitous on the internet? Homestuck references or supernatural references?
I actually think there's more Homestuck references, and I think it's because it's easier to make a Homestuck reference than a supernatural reference.
Yeah, because what I'm gathering from this is that Homestuck is so much that everything can be connected back to Homestuck.
Yes, that is completely correct. Homestuck encompasses so many different aspects of culture that you can kind of like incorporate it into whatever you're making and make that a Homestuck reference.
Okay, so also, let's say you have a superhuman person who does not need to like sleep or eat or poop or whatever. How long, start to finish, would it take to consume all of the Homestuck content?
I want to say a week.
That's still pretty long. I mean, I thought that the Barack Obama audiobook was long. That was like 40 hours or something.
So I spent about, I think, 4 days during finals week in high school consuming all of Homestuck, but there was only half the webcomic at that point, and this was done in between having to go to school and having finals. This was a choice I made. Did I not mention that? I did read Homestuck during finals week.
Okay. The Obama audiobook is 29 hours, so I was close. Funnily enough, he does not mention having sex with Dirk Snyder.
You said his name wrong. It's Dirk Strider. But yeah, I think that if you want to read/consume Homestuck in 2021, you could get it done in a week if you didn't sleep.
That's terrible.
Don't do that. But if you did that, maybe you too would be able to write something like Homestuck. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to reading the 700k Homestuck fanfic that I was reading before podcasting. If you like this episode, tell a friend. Word of mouth is how we grow. And perhaps leave a review on iTunes. Thank you to everyone who left a review so far, and thank you to all of our Patreon patrons. Shout out to Zoe Stoller and Dan McKeon specifically. Another shout out to Sam Rizer, who made our podcast music. You can find us online at wowtrue.com or on Twitter as @wowtruepod and Instagram and Facebook as @wowtrue. If you want to throw us a couple of dollars, slide right into our Patreon at patreon.com/wowtrue. If you've had your 15 seconds of fame, you've read the entirety of Homestuck in an unfathomable amount of time, or know someone who has, slide right into our Twitter DMs. Also slide into our Twitter DMs if you want to talk to me about Homestuck. Till next time, let's get famous on the internet.